Greetings, fellow Homo sapiens. Today I'm here with Saurabh Roy. Saurabh is a phenomenal guitar player, amazing songwriter, and the lead singer, front person, front man, front human being, front Homo sapien of the Lightyears Explode, which is one of my very favorite bands that I've seen here in Bombay. Saurabh, welcome to the program.
Hi Arnav, thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you. It's really great to finally have a proper chat with you, have that opportunity. Anyone who's listened to the podcast, has maybe heard me mention in some previous episodes that the Lightyears Explode is top 2 favorite bands in the country. And I guess I will repeat a little bit of why I love you guys so much. I just you guys have this punk rock energy that's really authentic. Punk rock, it can be a style of music, but it's more a way of playing music. There's a certain delivery in punk that you guys on stage, when I see you guys play live, you just have it. And it just feels totally real. And there's nothing about it that seems because punk has been around for ages now. So there's bands and artists that kind of maybe take on the punk label, but don't have the delivery. You guys, all 3 of you, and sometimes 4 of you, which I'd like to maybe clarify a little bit later, all of you come with that energy. So that's something that caught me right away. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that in person.
Oh, thanks, man. That's very sweet. It's interesting how you said that people that label themselves punk sometimes don't have that an authentic energy, whereas I have tried to not label us punk a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's cool that people think that we have that energy.
Well, you were introduced, your music was introduced to me, you probably know that Tejas Menon used to do, and maybe sometimes still does do a cover of one of your songs. And part of his stage presence and stuff is he would introduce the song as a cover and say that it's by one of his favorite bands, your band, the Lightyears Explode, and he would call it masala punk, which is a cool subgenre to inhabit. But I mean, it's interesting that you say that you have always tried to not label yourself punk, and I can understand what I'm the kind of guy that doesn't like to label myself. It's not like you reject the label, but you just don't really care about or have an attachment to a label. But one interesting thing that I noticed when I finally heard you, so you guys just put out an EP. What's the name of the EP? Mellow, right? I knew that. So when listening to the EP, the tracks sound super different than the ones when I hear them live. The songs that I recognize from live, they sound quite different. And a thing that I've worked with your sometimes bandmate Jishnu Short Round, and so I remember, I if I'm not mistaken, it took kind of a while to get some of these recordings together. Yeah. And I remember them telling me about the direction of the sound of these songs, and the way they were describing them to me sounded really different than the way I the times I've seen you guys play live. Uh-huh. What they were describing sounds really different, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how is this gonna. I had this really set idea in my mind of you guys as this band that I've seen live with this crazy energy, and I was really surprised when I heard the recordings, and pleasantly surprised, I should say. But they do sound quite different, and they you can still hear the sensibility, the punk sensibility, but it's quite it's got an 80s pop vibe to it, and there's lots of interesting production kind of elements, nice sprinkles and cool sounds, and a lot of there's some ear candy type stuff going on. And so my question is, I'm just, because I know some of the guys in your band, I had heard that the direction was kind of heading in in this way. So what I'm curious about, and I'm trying to ask in a long, rambly kind of way, is was that the idea that you had going into these recordings, or at some point along the way did you kind of get a light bulb go off and you were like, no, I want to go more in this direction? Can you describe to me how that happened?
So I basically worked backwards. Mm-hmm. I wanted this sound. This sound was in my head. I had mentioned earlier, I went to production school, and obviously we had released our first album, The Revenge of Kali Charan, and that was recorded a certain way. Jason recorded us. He was the producer on that.
Oh, right on. Jason is a dear friend of mine.
Yeah, so he was. We're very weird, sort of. Like we're hard to work with because obviously we're a little awkward, and instrumentally we're not the best instrumentalists, so we feel a bit shy working with people that we don't know. So it was really great to work with Jason because he just made us feel very comfortable. But
he's like that. I mean, he has that vibe. That's always been my experience with Jason. He's one of the main reasons why I'm still in this city. So I agree with
have that effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did that, and obviously we produced it. We did it in a very sort of live sort of way, and it was cool. But I felt a little something. Like, it sounds great, and I love it for what it is. For I didn't want to do it again, and I felt like I needed I just felt like going to production school. So
you went into production school after the whole first one was done.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
So I went there, and I was shell shocked, man. It was so different.
Yeah.
So. It was electronic music.
What was an example of something that's like quite shocking when you finally stepped foot into production school? What was it that blew your mind?
Raves. That's the first thing that blew my mind. Secondly is how little they sort of differently they cared about things. How they were a little, like, there was mixing class, and I'd try and like not do too much because I'd heard like you shouldn't do too much, right?
Yeah.
Like, respect the recording, and the mixing guy, and this guy was cool, man. He did like the first 2 Asian Dub Foundation records, and he came up.
Oh wow, that's quite cool.
And he came up to me and he's like, I can't tell any difference between the original thing and what you did. And so that pushed me to like more into like electronic music, not even electronic music, but electronic production in pop music.
Yeah.
Because it just felt like I was waiting for it. Because like, you trust your ears and you don't need to get too technical, and you can do these cool little things that just sound cool.
Yeah,
and
correct.
It's not like I didn't want to learn instruments, but I'm not naturally good at them. So I wanted to...
watching you play live, I don't get that impression. I feel like you're probably better than you're giving yourself credit for. But before you go on about production school, which I want you to keep talking about, where was it that you went to school?
In London, in a place called Point Blank.
Point Blank, yes.
So they were very electronic there. Like, I hadn't heard deep house before I'd ever gone there. And just being introduced to all these new techniques and weird things. When I came back, my bandmates were still the same.
Right.
Right, and obviously then Jeremy came into the picture, but he also did not know what was already going through my head. So it was a little unfair on them, but I mean, I write the song, so I'm going to write what I feel like.
Well, no, that makes more sense to me hearing it that way. And I mean, a guy like Jeremy he's pretty well versed in electronic music as well. I suppose that some of them might have been a bit confused, and that's how it was described to me. But I just didn't know what to expect ultimately. And then when I finally listened to them, they're just awesome, but they're their own kind of thing. Like, especially songs that I really remember hearing live, and like what is it, Anthemic in Drop D or something like that?
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, that's one that I really remember from seeing you guys play, and hearing it on the record. It sounds awesome, but it's a different kind of vibe. Like it's a very different vibe, and I was pleasantly surprised by all of that.
There's a band that I started listening to around the time I started writing these songs called Hayam. Like, they're pretty popular, obviously.
They're great,
but their live show sounds really different from their records, and that also inspired me because recording, I thought they were connected when I did the first album, but now I feel like they're two completely different things.
Oh yeah, I think about them very differently. Like sort of the difference between film and live theater.
Yeah.
You have and so you approach the two. You can approach the two quite differently, and sometimes people get in. You can get stuck in two different ways. Like you can be overly purist about the performance, and then you feel like, oh, like we got to perform it like exactly the way that we have to record it exactly the way we perform it every time. And then on the other flip side, sometimes you have artists that compose all their music in the studio, and then when they try to perform it live, they try to like replicate every like wacky thing that they did in the studio using like a lot of backup tracks and triggering and this and that. And it's better to embrace that the two things are like completely different mediums.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's a kind of hits on particularly that song, but all of the stuff on the new EP. I didn't recognize all the songs from the new EP from live performances, which is interesting to me. But the ones that I did recognize, I was like, oh yeah, okay.
So 2 of them we've never sort of played live, I think.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me based on what I've heard. But I wasn't sure. But the Anthemic in Drop D, it's such an interesting contrast.
Yeah. I mean, because I do both of them. To me, they seem more similar because I hear both the versions.
It's this.
To me, they just seem
the same song at heart, and you are like, I get the songs are like, the songwriting is very strong, is what I'm trying to say. So like at the heart, it's the same song, and it's not just these songs aren't just kind of slapped together at the songwriting level. Like on both your records, the songwriting is quite strong. So, and you being the guy that wrote them, perhaps that's why they ultimately sound.
I try and write songs that work on a songwriting level first before like. Of
course, yeah, that's what you want, but it doesn't always happen. For a lot of people. What the fuck is that crazy big insect in here? It's a struggle sometimes. Like, I mean, as a producer, the thing that you want and love is when a song is just amazing on its own, just chords, lyrics, and melody. And then it can be a different kind of dilemma. Like, how do I not ruin this by adding stupid things? You know what I mean? Like, you almost want to. It can prevent you from adding stuff if the song is really, really good.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. But then there are other times when, you're working really hard to like kind of cover up for an okay song, like, that's a completely different dilemma. So it's amazing that it's a incredible skill you have to write such songs, and then from there, as long as everything you add is tasteful, then it's just butter.
Fuck, thank you, man. I can swear, right? Shit, sorry. Oh.
No, yeah, you can totally swear. I mean, like just a moment ago, a large insect flew by that I didn't recognize, and I'm like, I'm sitting in my bedroom, like the windows are closed. How the hell did that get in here? It's strange.
Man, I'm having the same problem. There's so many insects. I thought once the monsoon ends, it would be like less, but no.
No, I still haven't figured out the insect situation. I mean, I've been living here for over 5 years, and I've been coming here my whole life. People tell me that like if I like close my balcony door at like exactly a specific time, and then open it after that, then I avoid the mosquitoes. And I haven't been able to time this properly. And then, that one mosquito hits in your bedroom, and you're just fucked. You can't sleep. You can't do anything. It's horrible.
Yeah.
What can you do? So,
yes.
How long did you spend at Point Blank?
I spent 8 months.
8 months. What kind of things did you learn there? I mean, I've never gone to a music production school, so I'm kind of interested. Like, what kind of things were they teaching you, and what specific type of things grabbed you? Like,
honestly, their courses are pretty like okay.
Yeah.
But what I found really interesting was the people teaching the courses. They just read off a book. But if you want to spend time with them, there's just a wealth of knowledge there. I remember the last day of sound design, nobody showed up, and this guy's just alone. He's like, ask me anything you want. You know what I mean?
Wow.
That kind of stuff. This guy, his name is Paul, and I think he was in a great band called Verve Vultures, and I think he was just so talented. Just to ask him stuff was... that song, Anthemic in Drop D, I had written it back then. I showed it to him. And the idea to syncopate the guitars was his.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It had like a like a heavy rock thing going on. He's like, man, you should just syncopate it. It'll make it like dancier. I'm like,
Yeah.
I didn't know what syncopation was back then. That's one of the things I learned.
I wouldn't have even. There are a lot of times when like I have a vague understanding of syncopation, but there are a lot of times when something is syncopating and I don't realize that it is. Sometimes I just get lost in the feeling of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But it's quite cool that you get to get like arrangement advice from these instructors as well. Like something you're working on. I mean, I suppose of course you would, but you got to ultimately utilize that and put that on your latest project. Sorry, go ahead.
The guy who mixed the EP actually he taught me there.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, I remember he used to, in one of the classes, he picked some random student's song to show how he'd mix it. Mm-hmm. I really wanted him to pick mine, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. But I guess we came full circle.
Hey, that works. It works out even better in the end.
Yeah.
How long did so you started recording the EP after you got back? And what year did you get back to Bombay?
I got back in 2015, like late 2015, I think. But before we started recording anything, we spent some time playing a few shows with Jeremy because we had another drummer, Aaron, before that.
Okay.
And just feeling that out. What we first did was recorded live, like how we would play it live. Mm-hmm. And then I heard it back and it just like, I just felt like this is not where I am right now.
Yeah.
So what I started doing was, and some of the songwriting was good, but it wasn't. So it was in my head. It was like I wanted to write these sort of poppy songs, and I felt it should be easy because I thought the previous songs were poppy in many ways.
No, I would certainly think so.
But when I tried to like bring the noise down, mm-hmm. it was different. For example, that the third song, Heartbreak Kid, it had distorted guitars in the beginning. And my friend Achint, who sort of produced the thing, I would just do a lot of work and like send him listen to this. What am I doing wrong? And he'd tell me like, mm-hmm. He's like, dude, you don't need distorted guitars in your verses. Like you have to build up to the chorus. It's not a punk song anymore.
Yeah.
You have to figure these things out. So that stuff like that he'd come up with. He'd just tell me like, he's like, your verses are too exciting, like not exciting, too excitable.
Yeah.
They need to calm down a bit so your choruses have more impact. You can't have. And this was not even on a production level. This was on a songwriting level. He was talking to me about. He played keys on Anthemic and Satire, mm-hmm. but most of his producing was like this. Like I'd do some work for a few days, I'd send it to him, he'd listen to it and just give me like tips like this, like the pre-chorus doesn't sound like a pre-chorus, it needs to go, you need to make a melody that sounds like that, like, and that was great for me because like he'd give me at that time what I was feeling like my people in my band were not into it that much. Mm-hmm. In the beginning of it, you can imagine it was quite a big shock.
Well, what I'm understanding now is that there was just a bit more confusion, like more than anything else, I guess.
Yeah. So I had to like, because I'd bring in these pop songs and I wanted them to be sort of pop, and then I'd come up with the structure and it'd be simple, mm-hmm. and then we jam it out, and it would just keep getting more and more complicated, and I. Mm-hmm. Felt that these weren't those songs. Like I'd already written the song on acoustic guitar. They weren't crying out for like extended breakdowns and stuff like
mm-hmm.
that the stuff that we were doing.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had to bring them on board, and to bring them on board I kind of had to finish it and show them like, look man, this is good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I felt I sent the album to Jishnu when it was done, and mm-hmm. he didn't, after a week, he just told me, man, I'm listening to it, and I was hesitant at first, but I think it's really good now.
Yeah.
And I felt so relieved, man. I felt so relieved because...
No, I was super impressed when I heard it. I like, the kind of, the way it's been produced, it's spot on. Like, well, all of that effort and meandering... It's paid off. I mean, it took a while. How long did it take exactly?
So it took like the best part of... there is a little funny thing that happened in between.
Yeah.
It wasn't funny when it happened. But my computer died,
Yeah, that's not funny.
and then
Especially
I
in
gave
this day and age, you tell that to people, that's a horror story for most people, I think.
it was a horror story for me.
Yeah.
So I went to the computer guy and at Maple on Linking Road, because fuck them. I gave my computer, and it's not completely their fault, it's also my fault. But I gave them my computer, and they're like, "This can't be fixed." And I'm like, "I was working on something. Can you bring me the last few files I was working on?" He's like, "Yeah, just give me your hard drive." I gave him my hard drive, and he partitioned it or something.
Yeah.
And the partition he made all the actual stuff I had, like, you couldn't reach it anymore, and he didn't know how to get it, and nobody else knew how to fix it. So basically,
Oh, brutal.
everything I had worked on was gone, so I had to start over again. That's one of the reasons.
Yeah, that's a huge setback. Never fun. So that
Yes.
happened like in the middle of the process.
That happened in early 2017.
Oh man, yeah, that's hard. And so you had to start over again from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were no guitars, there were no bass, there were only some drums left. So I was like, I could redo the whole thing the same way I did it, but that would be boring. So I not added more stuff, but I actually wrote a new song. Heartbreak Kid was not in the pile that we had recorded. And I I changed songs like Anthemic and Sata, and I just I couldn't do the same thing over again. It was
Yep.
too cumbersome, and it was exciting again.
That's exactly what you want. I think that also makes a lot of sense. Like if I kind of like lost a hard drive in that way, or a computer, and lost a lot of work, you kind of want to start fresh. It's hard to go back and like retread work you've already done.
Yeah.
So that's understandable. The songs, as we mentioned earlier, are so strong. I was wondering about maybe some of your songwriting influences. Like what kind of inspired your songwriting? Maybe maybe take it back to the earliest days you can remember.
The first album I was really into was the first Avril Lavigne album. I still think it's a classic.
Yeah, no, it kind of is, weirdly.
And I remember she had covered Basket Case Live. And then I went into that.
Yeah.
Then I went into that. Then that was a whole rabbit hole of its own.
Correct.
And I got really into punk rock. And that's why I didn't want to call myself punk also, because it felt like such a sacred thing. Its origins, its culture. But then it gets sort of, they get really protective of their bands in the culture.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Punk rock is definitely a culture that's like that. There's like a lot of sanctity around it. It kind of, especially because it emerged as sort of a counter, like a reaction to a lot of things.
Yeah.
One of those things was just the established rock and roll, what rock and roll was becoming. It was the first sort of reaction to after the rock era began. It was the first sort of reaction against the basic general rock that was happening. But then there was also an interesting thing about punk rock from my perspective. I don't know how accurate this is, but punk rock is like sort of, it seems birthed out of like middle class apathy or lower middle class apathy. This like whole notion that we grew up in like relative comfort, but it still kind of sucks, and like everything there's like this subtle sort of anti-consumerist aspect to it, which sometimes gets subverted again. But it has these things that it kind of rails against, at least stereotypically. And so I think when you have a culture that has something that it positions itself against, then the sacred part of it also comes with it as well. Like you don't want to disrespect the culture.
You don't want to disrespect the culture, but also I was at odds with the culture while getting into the culture, because I did like those rock bands. Like I do like Led Zeppelin and Fleetwood Mac and Hall & Oates, all those kinds of guys.
Now enough time has passed so that you can have that point of view. It reminds me of like when Dave Grohl was in Nirvana. I remember like they were almost obliged to hate like Guns N' Roses
Yeah.
types. But then like later on, you know, like they move on in their career. He starts the Foo Fighters. The Foo Fighters become like this like legendary band, and he's like, yeah, like I'm cool. Like I'm friends with Slash. Like I think Guns N' Roses are amazing. I was just like, you know, at that time, like we were the counter movement to the rock and roll of the 80s. So we kind of just like part of it is just being young and being against whatever the thing that came before you is. But then like, you know, but we're here sitting in the comfort of 2020, and we can look back on punk rock history, but we can also look back on classic rock history. And it's like, to us, it's like, okay, it's just, that's a vibe. And then this is another vibe.
Yeah, I was watching a video or like a video essay about a band that sounded a lot like the 80s, but they're like a young band. And the guy was commenting like, to them, you can't say they didn't grow up with the music of the 80s because they grew up in the internet age. They had access to all that stuff. It's their nostalgic music too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a funny part of 2020 that is kind of cool.
It's super valid. And like, you know, there used to be this kind of vague notion that like you'd get like a revival of something like every other decade, like in the way that in the 90s, by the late 90s, the 70s were really cool. And then in the 2000s, the 80s were really cool. And I certainly wasn't aware enough in the 80s to understand if there was any 60s throwbacks in the 80s, or to what extent the 50s were reflected in the 70s. It gets confusing. But that whole idea of like you kind of like skip the thing that came right before, and there's this like, now because the internet, we live in an internet era where you have access to everything at any time from any era. Even the whole idea about throwback, or you know what retro means, or what nostalgia means, it's like really nebulous. Like it could mean a lot of different things. There's so many different aesthetics that people can pull from, and there's also no sort of cultural obligation, especially for us sitting here in India. Like there's no cultural obligation for us to like dislike heavy metal because we like punk rock, or it just means it means a lot less. I experienced this when I was producing the Cognac Net album, where like they all kind of have this approach where it's like we do a lot of different kinds of music. We're an indie rock band, but we go through a lot of different styles. And for their previous album, They Finally Heard Us, most of it had this kind of indie rock sound, but there are these like two really heavy songs that to me don't sound like they kind of fit with the rest. And I was trying to like convince them to not. So like maybe release those songs separately or whatever. But they were just like, well, no, why? Like, you know, we like this kind of music and we like that kind of music, and we want our fans to know, and we want our listeners to know that that's what you get if you listen to us. And I was like, and in the end, I was like, sure. But that's an example where even I have this like prejudice where I really felt like, I don't know, like if it makes sense to have these two like very different songs at the end of this album. So we carry around this like cultural baggage, right? But the internet era kind of flattens that out. Like you remove geography and time from it, and it's like, yeah, why can't I listen to like big band music and, you know, synthwave or whatever the thing is?
Synthwave. Sorry.
Yeah. Add wave at the end of anything. I think yesterday we were watching a video about hyperpop.
Like 100 gex and stuff.
Yes, so you're familiar
stuff.
with it. Yeah. I only found out that hyperpop was a word last week because somebody made a video essay about it, and it came up in my YouTube feed, and I was like, hyperpop? Okay, cool. So I checked it out. The artist that I recognized from that was this producer called Sophie.
Charlie XCX.
Charlie, I've heard of. Yeah, is she the producer? Has she produced for Charlie XCX?
I think she has. That's where I think I heard of her.
Yeah, so I think it's. I get pretty confused. I'm not as good at following that stuff as I used to be, but that stuff is crazy, and it's a pretty interesting phenomenon.
Yeah. I just got into it like during the lockdown. I was like, they kept popping up, and I heard this song called Ringtone, and it was the cutest thing I had. I was like, what are they talking about? And then I heard they talk about funny stuff like, your arms are like cigarettes, I could smoke you. I'm like, this is cool.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like I'm not a songwriter. I like try to handle like almost all other types of music composition duties, but I'm not particularly strong at songwriting. I can help other people with their songs. That's kind of part of my job. But I'm not don't have a knack for songwriting. And pop especially, like I can recognize a hook when I hear it, but you got to help me if Lord help me if I got to come up with a hook. It's interesting to be able to pick one out. Can you describe like maybe what you think goes into a good pop song? Mostly for my benefit as a guy who, I don't know if I can put it into words.
This sort of extremely sugary feeling, but just with a tinge of melancholy. If you can get that, then you have your pop song. It's just and you get that feeling by it's a combination of something new, but mostly you gotta feel like you've been there before, but you want to be there. It's more of a feeling. I don't know how you would obviously technically
it's a feeling.
Yeah. It's like when the first time you listen to I Wanna Hold Your Hand, or it's just a feeling. When you feel it. When you hear the hook, it's that chorusy sort of pop song hook. I when I write a hook, I actually write like dozens and dozens and I just wait for it to sort of hit me.
Interesting. Do you often start with the hook?
So I'd say about 40% of the time, probably.
Okay, that's interesting.
But a lot of stuff like a satire, I would come up with the riff first. But in that song, the riff is kind of like a hook.
Yeah. So you've got like, as far as composing goes, you have like a few different ways you can start, and as a songwriter, you have a few ways you can start that I don't have access to. Like you can start with lyrics, whether it's a verse or a hook. I can relate to starting with a riff. But the lyrical part eludes me most times. But yeah, I find that really interesting. I kind of sidetracked you while you were talking about your songwriting influences and kind of what. So we had stopped sort of at it was Avril Lavigne led to Green Day, led to punk rock, and where can you pick up from?
Then I guess a really important album would be I love Oasis. I think they're a huge influence on my songwriting. Mm-hmm. Then I discovered Blur, and then I discovered Gorillaz, which blew my mind. I was
okay. So I have to sidetrack you again, because this is a question that gets asked in the UK a whole lot, apparently, which is like, Blur or Oasis? Which of those two for you?
I love them both, but Oasis.
Okay.
Blur are consistently better. Like they have more better albums, if that's a thing. But the first two are just so good and have so many iconic singles that it's kind of hard to. It's a really big shadow.
Yeah, true. Correct.
Wonderwall is like if you've been to the UK, exactly.
Yeah. After Wonderwall, how do you even? You gotta after you build that wall of wonder, you have to take a long slumber.
They took a really long slumber after that.
You can see why I don't write songs. So okay, Oasis, Blur. You got into the Gorillaz. What are we talking after that, if anything?
Then I guess the shift to the more retro influences was when I picked up a vinyl of Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, and then I heard Tango in the Night, which had all the synths and syncopated guitars and all that stuff. And then I got into like Cyndi Lauper and all that, Hall and Oates. Mm-hmm. I saw a movie called Sing Street. And I got into every band they were talking about.
Yeah. What's that?
The Cure, The Smiths.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's a really interesting sort of time.
Yeah.
And I guess those 80s influence are quite very much reflected in the EP.
Yeah. But I'm also, and this annoys my bandmates when I say this, I really like Taylor Swift. I think she's a really good songwriter. But also people like her, not like her, but in that pop zone, like Carly Rae Jepsen, Charlie XCX is pretty cool.
I draw the line before Carly Rae Jepsen, but Taylor Swift,
have you heard Emotion and her last album?
No, I haven't. I'm making a judgment because like she's the Calling Me Maybe woman, right?
You can't. That is the. That
I know.
Is, yeah,
I,
that's her.
it's not fair. You're correct. It's not fair. It's just when that song was big, I was working at Starbucks in Toronto, and it would just be playing quite a bit. I think on the if I'm not mistaken, just in the restaurant, and it was just quite a. I guess it wore a lot of people out. But the interesting thing about Taylor Swift is that I had a feeling she was gonna like make it huge like pretty early on, because it comes back down to the songwriting thing.
Yeah.
Like you could just tell, like no matter how you dress up the song, like as she's progressed, you kind of like you change the wardrobe of the song to fit, more or less to what current styles of music work.
Yeah.
But the songs at the heart of them were, they're always there. And she was always a person that it seemed pretty evident that she was either in control or interested in being in control of her own trajectory artistically. And so I just assumed that, she would blow up. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm rocking Taylor Swift in my house. I usually listen to pretty strange music, but I see what you mean with Taylor Swift. I guess I'll have to investigate this Carly Rae Jepsen thing and confirm.
Check out that Emotion album, I guess.
Emotion, yeah, cool. So okay, so you just put out this EP. Where are you at in terms of future music, future types of, are you looking at any interesting collaborations, or what are some new influences that are coming into it? Are you writing?
I've been listening to like a lot of like 2000s pop. Like I've been listening to Liz Phair. That one song has been on repeat. Like
Liz Phair was huge, yeah.
Yeah. I've been listening to Phoebe Bridgers a lot.
Yeah. That name sounds familiar, but I can't remember any songs of hers off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I forgot what her album's called, but it's the new one. It's really, really good. So while writing for this, I had written a lot more songs. Mm-hmm. So we have a few songs ready to go. Right now, I have a friend of mine. He's a really talented director and a cinematographer, mm-hmm. and I've been wanting to work with him for years now, since the first album. And he's just, I obviously we took a break when I went abroad, and when I came back, he was really busy. He's finally got some time off at the end of the year, and we have to finish the song and record the video by the end of the year. So I'm working on that, just trying to make sure my end, like finishing the song, is ready so that we can release that as soon as the year starts, I hope.
Do you have a plan for how you're going to do that in the midst of the sort of ongoing global pandemic scenario?
No. I mean, sort of. I love that. Look, so we didn't release any music. So Revenge of Kali Charan came out in 2013. The landscape very different. We actually printed CDs. Mm-hmm. There was no Spotify in India. There was no Apple Music. I mean, there might have been, but I don't think many people had it. Mm-hmm. Our music didn't even enter those platforms till like 2015 or 16, like years after it had come out. So the first music after that we released during the pandemic. So the only way, I guess, we know now how to release music is during a global pandemic.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So we'll basically do what we just did, I guess.
So, you've already done it. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not good at keeping up with this, but I believe I saw there were some visuals for the stuff you already released.
Yes.
The EP that just came out. So, is there like another chunk of songs that are going to come out as an EP, or is it going to be like singles, or what's the scenario?
My plan is to release a single every month or two in 2021, and during that, because I already have the songs, what I'm going to do is I want to write when the album drops, and again, it's that sacred thing. When I make an album, it's got to be like a concise thing with a theme and a plan, which I don't have right now. So I'm going to use that here, while these singles, which I have them written and I have them demoed. So all I have to do well, all I have to do, quotation marks, is finish them up. While doing that, I want to think about the themes I want to explore and the sound I want to explore, a consistent sound for when we do the album.
Right.
And I want to, what's happened now is, I feel like Jeremy and Shalom and even Jishnu, this new song, they've all contributed much more on this song than they did before, because I feel like they're into it now. And I feel like it's coming more naturally to them. Like,
well, yeah, now they got the idea, you know, I think I can understand that, because after hearing the EP, like, I mean, it just sounds great. So I think they can get on board with the vision if they weren't already. So Jishnu's fully in the band, I guess, now, like, going forward. Sometimes in shows, I noticed that, like, for the songs that it didn't require a second guitarist, he'd kind of go have a drink or whatever.
yeah.
So now, but, like, going forward, he's it's a 4-piece.
Whenever the thing is, Jishnu is the busiest out of all of us.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Like,
Jebs is pretty
easily.
busy also.
Jebs is busy, but, like, I don't know how to put it. He always shows up, like, I don't know, whenever I ask him to come for jam, he's always there.
That's because you got it's the Lightyears Explode, and who wouldn't? I mean, like, it's an awesome band. If you're in it, then I imagine you'll make the time. But I guess Jishnu is quite busy, and the work he does is super involved.
Yeah, so
like,
whenever he's free, it's just
yeah.
great fun to have him, because, like,
Yeah.
I'm getting more into like having a few songs where I play less guitar, because, like, I've been working a little bit on my singing. Like, I feel like it's different from a little bit from the first album, and to pull that off live, I need, because there's also, like, more syncopated guitars. It's just easier, like, for some parts, if I could just focus on the singing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, like, that can also be an option in the future for songs where it is just like a trio. You could offload guitar playing to him, and you could just, you know, even on the older songs, I guess that's an option, which is cool.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, there's a cool kind of aesthetic that it's like sort of tongue in cheek ish. You can even see it in the album cover for your first album.
Yeah.
And I noticed when you guys opened for the Cognac Net for their release show, whoever was doing the visuals. Now I heard that somebody, like, last minute, like, offered to do these visuals for you guys, but those visuals were spot on. Like, they were really great, but they also really fit what I perceive to be the vibe of your band anyway.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Like, who put those together for you?
So the Cognac Net for their album launch had that gigantic screen.
Yeah.
And we were like, there's a screen behind us, we should do something, right? Like, make an effort.
Yeah.
So we were thankful enough that Shalom knew this guy, Hiren, and he called him and he said, would you do it? And he's like, yeah, man, I'll do it. He just showed up. He knew what to do. He just did it. I actually did not see the visuals. I only heard that everyone enjoyed it, which is great. I did during the set sometimes, turn back, but very, very early on while performing, my friend told me you should not turn your back on the audience.
That's an interesting rule. I remember that from theater arts when I was in high school, when we were doing plays, like, you don't turn your back to the audience. I feel like it's, like, less important in a rock band scenario. You don't want to obviously do your whole.
It really is.
Yeah, you don't want to do the whole song with your back to the audience, but you like to see a band that looks at each other, and sometimes that involves also looking at the drummer. However much we may not want to look at the drummer.
I mean, I'd make a beeline for the drums whenever I don't have to sing.
Yeah, there you go. It's that translates in terms of the chemistry and stage presence.
We rehearse a lot. That's one of the sometimes why Jishnu doesn't play, because we like to rehearse like 4 times before a gig, the night before the gig, sometimes the day before the gig, because maybe it's just me, because I feel really incompetent sometimes. I feel like I have to over prepare.
It's good. I know a lot of acts that don't rehearse so much. I mean, the interesting thing about our music scene here in Bombay is that so many people are playing in so many different bands. Like Jebs is a good example. He plays in like 158 bands.
Yeah.
And there's so many other people, that come to mind that are just playing a show here, playing a show there. You know, some people are doing that's their whole, you know, profession. And people don't often get a lot of time to rehearse. And rehearsing, like, you know, it seems like common sense, but it's true. It pays off so much, right? And, you know, if you rehearse a lot, then eventually you get to a point where you start reinventing the arrangements in a better kind of way. It develops chemistry as well, you know?
It does.
So there's all these things that happen. Yeah, and so a lot of
it
that...
annoys everybody. The whole rearranging thing.
Yeah.
But I can't stop, man. It's too much fun.
Yeah, do you mean rearranging for like live or rearranging in the recording process?
For live, like, you know, just learning everything again. I mean, no one gets angry or anything. They're just like, well, the inside jokes, like you changed it again, you changed it again.
I wonder if that's because of the recording process part of it.
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that it would be a lot of fun to reinvent a song, especially if you've played it a bunch of times a certain way. But the thing is, if you have good chemistry, then you can do that. I mean, the reason why the Lightyears Explode has such good chemistry, well, the reason why the shows are so good is because you guys have good chemistry. Like, that's the perception that I get as a member of the audience.
But I think one of the reasons we do have good chemistry is also because, like, there is like we make fun of each other, and I like that.
You got to do it.
Sort of tension that's there. Like, you know, I remember me and Jebs got into a really huge argument about Harry Potter versus Fast and the Furious. It got really ugly.
It's not the type of thing that I would get heated about, but, you know, it's important to have those things. Yeah. I just arbitrarily like to hate Star Wars, and I've never seen a Star Wars film, and it's one of these things that I just choose as my sort of unreasonable hill to die on. And I feel like if you choose something fairly insignificant in the grand scheme of things to be like totally ignorant about, then it saves some cognitive energy for to be a little bit more patient about more important things that are tearing our society apart. So I try to give people a hard time about Star Wars, just so that, you know, I can, like, let's call it anti-Star Wars chauvinism or something like that, you know. And it keeps me away from maybe falling prey to other types of chauvinism, hopefully. So there was something else I wanted to ask you, but it's kind of escaping me now. Shit. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you what kind of goes into, like, what are the things outside of music that you pull from in terms of your songwriting? Like, what are some of the other types of things you're influenced by?
In songwriting, it's just like human sort of just interacting with my friends and my band and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Just what I write about. I like Star Wars.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's most people do.
So I'm into pop culture, like not in the sense like in a fanboy sense, I hope, but in a like I like how it affects people sort of way.
Yeah, that stuff's really interesting. And I mean that, you know, like if you do something that's sort of subversive or like going back to the album cover of your first album.
Yeah.
Revenge of Kalicharan, right? That's the correct album title. That is like a pop culture reference, a clear pop culture reference, but it's obviously supposed to be subversive.
Yeah.
And so presumably there's like at least one layer of irony involved. And so in order to like create content like that, and even the visuals, even though you weren't responsible for it, but the fact that those visuals matched the vibe of your band so much indicates that there's like a certain, you have to understand pop culture in order to have even the irony, the ironic take on, or cynical take, or subversive take on pop culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love subverting pop culture. Even my favorite Star Wars film is the one everyone hates, the Last Jedi one, because it subverts the whole thing and sort of makes fun of it.
Yeah, well, there you go. So you know what I'm saying. Sometimes it's just fun to be a contrarian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the pop culture has been a huge influence, both Indian, obviously with the Revenge of Kalicharan, and and general sort of Western pop culture. But not in, I don't like to think of myself as a fanboy of anything. I want to, love certain things, but I don't want to be obsessed with them in an unhealthy way. Obviously, you can't help yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's what I want to pull from in pop culture. Sort of like the feeling you get. Like, I don't want to write songs about Star Wars or about like imperial things, but I want to write songs that sort of make me feel like when I was a kid and saw Star Wars with my dad. That would be what I would pull from how I view pop culture. And
yeah.
To me, like, that's not so different, or it comes from a very similar place when you write about your friends or love or politics. When, you know, it comes, all of them come, if they come from the same place, when you want to write authentically, I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, I never get, I mean, I don't want to diss bands that do that or anything. I don't get sort of, actually, I don't even know many that do it. But like, if you have one aesthetic for everything you do, probably like something like Motorhead. But I love Motorhead. What am I saying?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. There are like only a few bands that can get away with doing that. Motorhead is one of them. Maybe
Ramones
AC/DC would be Ramones, AC/DC. These are bands where like if they do anything that's different than what they did do before, you're just like shocked and you're kind of upset.
Yeah.
They're, for the most part, you want artists to evolve and explore different things. For the most part, I mean, a lot of mainstream listeners, it can be jarring. But even if you think of like one of the oldest rock bands, oldest rock band, like the Rolling Stones, think about all the different styles of music and genres they explored in their work. You know, so that makes sense.
Oh man, dude, the Beatles are so in my subconscious. I forgot to mention that they're one of my biggest influences. I just remembered.
Well, you mentioned "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and I thought that was a really interesting thing that you referenced. It makes sense because we're talking about pop music. The Beatles is one of the, like, I'm less serious about sort of criticizing the Beatles. Like, I do it as a joke, but like when people talk about the older rock bands, there's like Rolling Stones and the Beatles seem like two that existed around the same time.
Yeah.
And I always lean more towards the Stones just because I feel like they, even before punk rock was a thing, they had a certain attitude that was not present in the Beatles. Whereas the Beatles were like in the beginning.
The Who had that sort of punk rock attitude.
I don't know, when was the Who in relation to all this other stuff? I'm not super sure about it. That's my only.
I think the
that's
early
my only
stuff.
fuck up.
I think the early stuff came around when these guys were in the middle of their stuff, right? Like their first My Generation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then
the Who, yeah, you're correct about that. But the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand. I mean, so when I think about the Beatles, I think about the Beatles like post-Revolver, like Revolver and forward, when they finally were blossoming into this like weird psychedelic stuff, and I always give examples of like I want to hold your songs, like I Want to Hold Your Hand, or you know, She Loves You, yeah. It's like really similar to, you know, like Baby Bye 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 by NSYNC, or you know, that Justin Bieber song She Loves You, oh. Something, I don't know, I can't remember. Baby oh. Like these songs where you have words repeating 3 times, and like I don't actually like. There's something really poppy about that. There isn't something really, it is pop, right? Like it's the essence of pop, so it makes sense that you would mention that. But I've often spoken about that in a mildly, you know, derisive, throwing shade kind of way. More so when people complain about pop music today. Like sometimes you'll encounter somebody that like can't stop complaining about, say, something like Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber, or, you know, rewind 2 decades, and it's like NSYNC, and people be complaining about this stuff, and then they'll like, but you know, the Beatles, it's not like it used to be, and it's like, man, it's actually the same. I'm sorry, man. Like this pop music is kind of, it's still the same essence, you know. And I remember it really dawning on me when I saw, not really dawning on me, but an example that I remember was when Justin Bieber sang that baby, is it baby?
Yeah.
Oh, that song. But he sang it, I think, at an award show, and it was acoustic, and it just sounded like a Motown song, like just in its acoustic form. It sounded exactly like that, And so the whole thing about the Beatles, pre-Revolver Beatles, it's always an example that I would use to like indicate to people that like the pop music that you're hating on right now shares a lot in common with those pop music foundations that you have in the Beatles, like pre-Revolver especially.
Yeah.
But you know, of course the Beatles are a huge influence on you. I guess that would make a lot of sense.
Do you like? I was thinking about the beat. One of the reasons I haven't been listening to them for a while is, oh, okay, no, this is getting heavy. But like a friend of
No, go for it if you want.
I did read their biography, and they're not the nicest people.
Doesn't seem like it. No.
So, you know, you're supposed like there is this whole separate art from the artist thing, but they do sing a lot about love and all these things, and sometimes it feels as you grow older, it feels a little weird. But
Paul McCartney has a really weird relationship, or he started like a big fuss in my home province in Newfoundland, because like where I come from in Canada, they're like part of even the indigenous tradition there is seal hunting. Now, like the European settlers also engaged in seal hunting, and so there are many people who live in sort of rural communities or outport communities, as we call them. They used to the hunting seals used to be a part of the economy and also part of tradition for some people.
yeah,
And Paul McCartney was married to that woman that was missing a leg. I can't remember her name now. Which one of his wives that was? But she was really into this animal rights activism, and
yeah,
in and around that time, the animal rights PETA, I guess, decided to attach itself to the like fighting against the seal hunt, because like the killing of the seals looks a lot more brutal than a lot of other types of hunting, because it's like a seal against the snow, like the white snow, so like the blood is really visible. So
Yeah.
it was like an easy thing for PETA to like just latch on to these images from the seal hunt and say like, this is barbaric. And people in my home province generally tend to support the seal hunt a lot. They're like, listen, this is like we actually use a very humane way of killing, but it's because, you know, it's on the snow that it looks that way. They actually, you know, there's details about it that maybe I won't get into too much. But he came with his wife and lent his sort of like celebrity profile to protest against the seal hunt. And then he went on American news and debated with the leader of the provincial leader, like equivalent of a chief minister in India, like my province's sort of.
okay,
He debated with that guy on American news, and people in my home province had kind of turned against Paul McCartney during that time. I don't know what the atmosphere is like now, but what it ended up it's very much seemed like basically Paul McCartney didn't know what he was talking about. Like the only reason he showed up to protest against this thing because his wife dragged him over the ocean to do it, and so you know, that's just a weird anecdotal thing about Paul McCartney as relates to where I'm from. But yeah, you do hear about that kind of stuff, like, you know, about them not necessarily and they had a lot of internal conflicts. I mean, so much of that stuff was before I was born. Like yeah. I guess like they split up before I was born, and you grow up with, and this is another reason why I used to sort of just for fun sort of throw shade on the Beatles, because growing up, the Beatles are just given as this thing that like it's sort of sacred. Like you're just supposed to worship this. This is why pop music exists. This is why rock music exists. And there's a huge difference between just being told that and hearing the songs ambiently in pop culture versus actually for the first time, maybe you're in your 20s and you finally purchase a copy of Sgt. Pepper and the Lonely Hearts Club or whatever it is, and you sit down and listen to it. And that's such a different experience, like actually appreciating a record like that versus just parroting out an opinion that the Beatles are the best band ever just because that information has been ambiently sort of fed to you your whole life from the culture at large. And yeah, that's and that's how I always relate to the Beatles. I mean, I think they're brilliant, and I love their music. But I always have that weird perspective on it, just because I had that same experience with the Rolling Stones. Like, I got into the Rolling Stones much earlier than I got into the Beatles, but I was still in my 20s. And the Rolling Stones is another one of these bands where it's like, well, of course the Stones are awesome. They started this whole thing. You gotta show the Rolling Stones some respect. The difference with the Rolling Stones is that they're still around and kicking, and they've been putting out records throughout my life. But it wasn't until I like sat down and like listened to their songs properly where I was like, this is amazing. This is amazing. I didn't realize, like, it's hard to understand what the Beatles meant in the context of that time, right? Like, you think about all those people screaming and those fans just losing their shit. Like, we can never experience that directly, but as we grow older and we see, you know, similar phenomenon that's happening in our times, sometimes you can kind of get it. You know, like, you're like, oh, okay, like the way that everybody's screaming about this artist right now, they were doing that about the Beatles back then, and it was like the first time this kind of thing was done. Like, that has taken a long time to sink in for me, you know. Even the internet era, just the fact that you can look up like old performances of the Rolling Stones, like, that's something I took for granted for so long. And then I I think less than a year ago, sometime within the last year, I actually like went on YouTube and looked up. I tried to find like the earliest performances of the Rolling Stones that I could find. And I realized that, first of all, I haven't seen any of these videos. I never thought to look for them. But they're also like, shit, this is so old. Like, this is such an old specimen of like the rock band, you know, that I just never thought to look for. And it's like, you slowly start to get it. You're like, now I understand what, like the same with Hendrix, you know, like we just grow up learning how to play Hendrix licks. And finally, when you put it in the context of the time, like, you're like, shit, that's like a fucking, you know, that's like a revelation. Like, imagine seeing that for the first time. Like, imagine seeing somebody play the guitar that way for the first time ever in history. Like, that's the part that is just, you know, it's always just in a constant state of sinking in more and more when I revisit those things.
It's probably similar to the first time they saw Star Wars.
Ah, nice. I like how you did that. But it's not going to happen. I'm not going to watch Star Wars. I refuse.
I mean, it's toxic now. There's no point.
I have to keep this going. I have to keep this going at this point. Otherwise, you know, what does it even mean?
Yeah. And I really feel like it's better to just avoid it in the internet age. Have you seen Star Wars Twitter? It's crazy.
There's Star Wars Twitter? I didn't even...
Yeah, it's worse than football Twitter.
Wow. That's saying something.
Yeah.
What are people arguing about on Star Wars Twitter?
Well, the new films versus the old films, George Lucas versus Disney, Kathleen Kennedy. The Star Wars has become social justice wars. Wow,
I've heard that one. You know, I've heard about that one. Man, people will find anything to fight about on Twitter. It's shocking.
Yeah, man, it's hilarious and shocking. It's hilarious till it gets scary.
And toxic. Yeah, and it seems like so many topics can get twisted into this weird culture war thing.
Yeah,
and the culture war is global. That's also really strange.
That is strange.
Yeah, it's a weird era to consume these things in. Like, I'm not able to speak super freely about Indian politics on my podcast, and I don't necessarily want to get into that. But just a quick thing that I can mention is that, like, certain words from the culture wars that are really prevalent in the West get weaponized over here in like a different kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, I remember somebody was trying to make... Do you know the historian Romila Thapar?
No, bro.
She's one of our best historians in India. She's like the grandma that we all need right now. And she's amazing, and she's an extremely respected historian. She's one of the founding members of JNU. And there's this one guy there's multiple people on YouTube that, because her lectures are so good and she's so smart, right-wing people are trying to like make videos to like debunk her. And one of the titles of one of the videos was Decolonize Romila Thapar. And I was like, wow, decolonize, hey? Like that's pretty brutal. Like that's shocking. Yeah, and so yeah, like it's just such a mess out there. Like online is such a mess. How do you think what does that mean for pop culture? Like as a guy that, is kind of maybe you have one eye towards pop culture. What do you think is different about that in the context of all this crazy information clusterfuck that we're in?
Well, honestly, this year at least it's been really hard to gauge, not personally, because thankfully I've been able to like just stay with my dad and like eat and be very comfortable. Pop culture I feel it has a bit more responsibility than it did before. Everything is really, really hyper, like, and everything is really divided. People are fighting with each other. Because now they can, right? I love social media and I love the internet. I mean, I grew up on it, but it brings out a certain side which is interesting in a bad sort of way.
You said it. Yeah, I mean, you said it because I find it very interesting and I also find it very bad. I mean, so I agree with you completely. I mean, I spend a lot of time trying to like learn about this stuff to the best extent that I can as just some random idiot. But it is definitely interesting. The whole way that information travels now it's like I don't think we have developed the cognitive skills. Like I don't think we've collectively wrapped our brains around how information sort of travels and flows.
Yeah.
And it's sort of doing a number on the whole thing. And there's an interesting notion with pop culture about how in the past, especially like if you take a place like America, for example, you have a show like Johnny Carson, and this notion of shared experience where like,
everyone's watching it at the same time.
Yeah, almost all of America would be watching that one thing, and so most Americans had this like shared experience with each other that you could touch on. So when you met somebody, you have this commonality that you can use to sort of get the ball rolling. So it's like has this social lubricant effect. But like now with like the way social media is set up, everything is so niche.
Yeah,
like everything is niche all the time. So. It's hang on, the doorbell just rang. I'm just gonna go figure out who that is. I'll be right back. It's always marginally terrifying when the doorbell rings in the middle of a pandemic. You're just like, wait, who the hell is that?
I know the feeling.
Anyone. Yeah.
The first.
Sorry, go ahead.
The first time the bell rang when the lockdown started, I was like, who is that? Why would they need to be here?
Yeah, yeah. Why would anybody want to see me?
Yeah.
I think what I was saying was social media has this like everything is so niche. So this notion of shared experience is kind of like you have like hyper shared experience with like a small tribal group of people, but this like larger shared like it's more complicated than that because there are certain things where like let's say Johnny Carson was this shared experience that all Americans had.
Yeah.
But now you have something like Game of Thrones, which is this shared experience that all these people all around the world have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have all this other stuff that's so niche that people don't even know what their neighbors believe or can't even understand their neighbor's point of view. So
yeah,
it's like distorted in both ways. Like in one sense, the shared experience thing has been totally gone global, and on the other hand, we can't seem to get along just at the local level. And that's a very weird feeling.
It is. It's, when people say it used to be better, I don't know, like, if it used to be better, but like, maybe it's so heightened because some of the things that's making people mad, they just didn't know existed before, and now it's all over the place.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Now, see, there's an aspect of that that's good. Like at the most basic level, if there's something that you should be concerned about, but you couldn't be concerned about it earlier, then it's good that you can maybe find out that information. But we just can't stop looking at the train wreck. Like, once you find something that annoys you, you'll go down the rabbit hole and look for every kind of example of this thing that is really bothering you. And so you end up with people like
MAGA reactions to Trump losing.
Yeah. Well, that's one example out of so many things, right? So then people come people come preloaded with all these examples of this one specific kind of grievance, and when they meet somebody who has the opposite set of grievances and they have all these examples, then it's just a horrible clash.
I feel like that kind of political stuff is also happening in pop culture, and maybe not music as much, but definitely in like DC versus Marvel fans or stuff like that. But I find like in music it's happening less. Like I find like when I was growing up, like punk bands used to hate metal bands or used to make fun of them or stuff like that. But now it feels like there's more of the genres have mixed, and there's less of a looking down on other people for doing other things.
Yeah, that's
strange. I feel
that's an interesting thing that you're pointing out. I sense that you're right, and although I've never thought about this before, it's the first time I'm really thinking about it. And the genres have broken down quite a bit. Like it's less like I'm less likely to encounter people that just hate one specific genre obligatorily because they
I can't listen to techno.
Huh?
Like I can't listen to techno.
Yeah.
Death before disco. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember disco sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the quintessential 80s slogan, or I guess, or
I mean, it depends unless you like disco in the 80s. Like,
yeah. That's a funny one. Like, hating on disco is a funny one because it's just amazing how the 4 to the floor thing just sticks around in every decade. Like, you can hate on disco, but then in the 70s, but then the 80s had its own 4 to the floor music.
Yeah.
With essentially a disco beat, and then by the time the 90s rolls around, you still have more 4 to the floor music, and that's actually kind of interesting. Hey, like, how do you have the same beat 4 to the floor, yet through the ages that 4 to the floor thing has been explored in so many different ways?
But also the same sort of GDC sort of chord progression have been explored in so many different.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I'm fairly certain that 100 Gex song I heard that's like a similar chord progression, but it sounds really different, doesn't it? When like with the auto tune and the noise.
I've only heard the 100 Gex thing from the from this hyperpop video essay thing.
Okay.
And it sounded like something from a different planet.
It did.
I need to dig into that genre a bit more.
I find that genre polarizes a lot of people musically. That's one of the musical genres I felt like is polarizing still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly people talk about mumble rap. People talk about SoundCloud rap. But then those every now and then you get a artist from that space that just blows up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trap music.
Trap is interesting. It's stuck around for quite some time,
and it's sort of melded its way into mainstream pop, like easily.
Yep.
Like,
well, it's like so many trends make their way into mainstream pop.
Yeah.
But trap has like made its way into mainstream pop and stuck around for a long time. And I think there's something about it that I think is going to just remain. Like I think we're going to just keep the residue of trap music. It's like it's not going to go out. Even though like a lot of people express frustration about it, I think that hard-hitting bass and those like stuttery hi-hats, I think people will keep using those kind of motifs and reinventing them.
Yeah. I mean, once it's out there, it's kind of hard to go away, especially once it gets that big. It sort of becomes part of the culture and then gets resampled, sort of.
Yeah. Well, there's certain genres that max out.
Yeah.
Like they just become caricatures and max out. Like say dubstep was something like that, right? Like where like if you talk to like electronic music heads, they when they talk about dubstep, they're talking about something really different.
Yeah.
But there was this moment in pop culture where the dubstep genre had this like really crazy caricaturized version that existed.
Pro step.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're the right guy to tell me about these labels. I'd never heard of bro step, but it just makes sense the second you hear it. But that happens, right? Sometimes these genres just become so comical that people start rejecting it. But then you can always go back and find the sort of original gem
versions of it.
Yeah,
that you
like the original sort of good versions of it that before it became caricaturized. Like you see that with, say, grunge and post-grunge.
Yeah, you see it with a lot of things, like even like pop punk bands that started doing the coordinated dancing.
Oh yeah, though they're like just tossing the guitar, spinning the guitar around you, and all that kind of yeah.
I remember I was when the first the second My Chemical Romance album came out, and I'm like, this is really cool. And then the fifth My Chemical Romance came out, and I'm listening to something else. It was really good still. It was just that there was like everybody was listening to them, and I guess at that age, like I was like 15 or 16. You wanted to rebel against that stuff. Like if you see lots of people doing one thing, you want to do the other thing. I kind of grew out of that. That's why I'm more accepting of pop music also.
Yeah, I think I would do more of what other people did if I was good at it. I mean, I think a lot of the way that I bluff my way into being a producer is just by trying to do things that sound like noise, and then claiming after the fact that this is what I was meant to do. But yeah, if I could write a slick pop hook, then I think I would be doing that as well.
Man, I heard like the Mundane. That's a pretty slick pop record.
That's Mally, man. I mean, I produced it, and we definitely like made it together. But that's the fun thing about working with Mally. I was just hanging out with her today, and like she understands pop music. I mean, it'd be really interesting to hear a conversation between the two of you about pop music. And I just spend a lot of my time listening to really strange kinds of music, very much the opposite of pop, especially over the last few years, especially since I moved to India.
Yeah.
And so it like when I'm hanging out with her, she really introduces me to what normal people are listening to, but like the really best versions of that. I mean, she introduced me to the band Haim.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she introduced me to another band just the other day, the Staves.
Ooh.
And that's like countless other artists, you know, the Midnight. Yeah, but I can't even remember all the names, but that's how I get my dose of pop music these days, is usually vicariously through certain people that I'm working with. Like if you came over to my house and you were forced to listen to what I listen to, I mean, I don't know what your where your experimental taste lies, but my taste in music definitely often freaks people out, for sure.
There was this one song that did freak me out. The Cognac Night guys were playing it before they went on stage. I don't remember what it was, but it was really weird. It was like a metal song, but then it became really poppy in the middle, and then it became really metal again.
Maybe I know what you're talking about. I think they have a song called Something New. I think it's called Something New.
No, not the so they were playing a song that you had introduced them to.
Oh, really?
Before the yeah.
Specifically something I introduced them to.
Yeah,
hey?
they were saying like Orno like showed this to us.
Oh wow! I'm curious as to what that could have been.
We were hanging out right before their gig and at someone's David's place, and he was playing some stuff.
Oh, interesting. Very cool.
Yeah, man, I would love to talk to like anyone about pop music, especially people like as good as like Mali or Tejas or like Abhilasha Sinha. I don't get out much, so I don't get to talk to other musicians as much as I like, because I just get nervous because I just feel like they're so much better than me. What am I going to talk to them about?
We all respect you very much, so there's no need to feel that way.
That's nice to hear, man.
But it's better to feel that way than to be really like arrogant. So you're on the right track.
I mean, I'm arrogant on stage. Just after the 45 minutes, I'm back to like normal.
That's ideal. That's an ideal situation right there.
Yeah, it's.
I have not performed in years. Like when I was in high school, I used to be in like band and choir, and I used to be in plays and stuff, and I used to really fancy myself a performer. And I was also very arrogant at that time. Then like immediately when high school ended, somehow immediately me performing on stage ended, and I went to university, but then I became this like bedroom producer while like a lot of my friends were in bands and stuff. And that I'm 37, so that was like nearly 20 years ago. And the big thing that I find now, like for example, I just was rehearsing with Mally. I've got to like do like little 1-2 small contributions to a performance, And it's really difficult. Like because I don't actually have this cockiness. Like I went through very early on, I went through this period of like when I was like 18, 19, 20, when I was like quite arrogant. And I quickly at that young age, because of my arrogance, quickly realized that was just a terrible way to, not only is it a terrible way to be with others, but it's just also not fun to do music on your own. Like the whole fun of collaboration is actually feeding off other people's energy, and you need to actually respect and appreciate other people to even understand that they're bringing something to the table. So I kind of after moving out of that, I kind of maybe went a little bit too much in the other direction, because now I feel very awkward on stage, and I don't perform. Everything I do is, on the production side. I can play like a handful of instruments, but I'm always just playing for like a couple of bars, and maybe I loop it or I sample it, and nowadays I just get somebody else to play it. So the fact that you're able to sort of be arrogant, or self-describe yourself as arrogant when you're on stage, and then you find that just you can switch it off when you step away. That's ideal as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I don't switch it off on purpose. It just happens. I would love to be slightly arrogant in some other situations, not always, but
Yeah.
There are some situations you feel like, man, if I could just be like punk rock sort of, huh?
You're probably better off in more times than not, the way you are, I think. Yeah.
I feel so too, but you can't always get what you want or want what you need.
Yeah, correct. What else? What are some specific things in pop culture that interest you? Like, we're talking about pop culture generally, but like, is there anything right now that's kind of like been catching your attention?
What, in 2020?
Yeah. Which is really another way of asking, what have you been up to during this crazy lockdown pandemic? How have you been kind of spending your time?
So I've been finishing up the songs, and I produced my first artist that isn't me, which was extremely fun. But again, it was a little nerve-wracking. They send you their song, and then you have to do stuff to it, send it back, and you're wondering, what if they don't like it? Because I put so much effort into this, and if they don't like it...
I go through that a lot. I didn't know this. So are you allowed to tell us about the artist, about the song?
The artist her name is Arushi. I don't think she's released anything before, but my friend introduced me to her. She wanted someone to do the song, and I really liked it. She's got a crooning sort of vibe. I don't want to name other artists, but it's kind of modern, but in a cinematic sort of way. So it was fun to work on something so different than I'd already done something different. This EP felt different than anything before, but this was really different and a lot of fun.
What how would you describe? Well, what's the name of the single first of all?
I think right now it's called Every Time. It's not done yet. We're still working on it.
Okay. How would you describe the sound other than cinematic?
Cinematic sort of pop,
No, I mean this. I'm glad to hear that you're producing other artists. I'm interested to see where that goes and the sort of sounds and stuff that you explore as this continues. Out of the songs that you said that are remaining, approximately how many do you have written that you are going to kind of try and put out, one by one?
I have 8, but I feel like I'm going to cut a couple by, it always ends up happening that way.
Yeah. And so basically you're going to want to put out these sort of one-off songs, singles as they're called. And while you're doing that, you're going to try and figure out a more cohesive concept around which to maybe build an album around.
Yeah, more lyrically than sonically, because I don't know if that how much. I feel like if I'm talking about the same thing, the music will make sense. So I need to find, because right now I'm writing about various different things, and they don't seem to make much sense with each other, apart from the fact that they seem to be written by me. And I need something more thematic for me to feel like it to be worthy of being called an album. Albums are really important, and I want, when I call something an album, for it to I want to start writing it as an album and deal with. I don't want a collection of singles that I call an album.
That makes
You know
sense
what
to
I mean?
me. Yeah. I find it really beneficial also to be working concurrently on smaller things and also larger scale things. So like an album is like a long time commitment, and you want it to be cohesive. And while you're waiting to finish that or complete that concept, or even conceive of that concept, it's good to have things that you're putting out on a regular basis that kind of keep your creative juices flowing, and it's also gratifying. Like just finishing stuff and putting it into the world is satisfying usually. So it's good to have both on your plate. You're talking about how albums are really important to you. Is there a theme from the first album that might be lost on a guy like me?
Yeah, the whole album starts at midnight and ends at 5 in the morning and chronicles like a crazy night in like a supernatural, hyper real version of Bombay.
That's cool. Now that I know that, I'm going to be listening to it again with that in mind. Yeah.
The first song starts at midnight, and I think the last song ends at 5 in the morning. It's like a night of like it's a night of like frivolous rebellion, like you're rebelling against cops because you want to smoke weed, stuff like that. It's not really important, but you still feel strongly about it, and you're going through this journey. But at some point in the night, as sometimes I would in those nights, because you were just in a rock band and you would end up with like some shady people, you'd end up meeting an over-the-top character that you thought that was really cool at some point, but then you were like, this is too much, I need to go back the other way now.
Yeah,
and that sort of happens in the P-Man Explode song. He's like like a hyper real version of himself, which he basically scares us kids, and we go back into like hiding in the last two songs.
I'm really glad I asked you that, because that's like a whole new, fresh perspective on that collection of songs.
But another reason you probably didn't get that was because in this package CD, if you turn to the track list, you have the timings, but not timings like when the song starts, but when it at the time of the night the song is happening.
Oh, right, that's important. Yeah. Is there like a thematic kind of aspect to the EP?
No. It's just
songs you felt kind of fit together.
Yeah. I don't even, they do fit together, but I wasn't even thinking of it that way. I was just trying to, now that I wrote those 4 songs, I feel like I'm much more comfortable writing these kinds of songs, and I feel like the songs that are coming out now are more confident in their shoes. And also because obviously now the other members are putting more into it, I feel like they've gotten more into what kind of things I want, because like, it's all sort of working better now, and it's obviously easier to when 4 people do it instead of when like not 4 people do it.
Yeah, and they're all going to bring their personalities to the forefront, and those each one of those. I mean, I don't know Shalom too well, but I mean I know Jishnu and Jebs.
Yeah.
I've worked with Jishnu, and I mean I'm used to seeing Jebs all the time, and those guys are really great creatively as well. So if you have music that they're all contributing to quite a bit, then you're going to get an interesting result with all the personalities coming forward.
This song that we're coming out next, Jishnu just sent back his sort of backing vocals and a few guitar tracks, and a couple of days back, man, it's so good to have harmonies in the song. This song especially, I mean, I can't wait for when people hear it to see what they think.
Yeah, I look forward to it. What's the name of this upcoming song, and when do you plan on putting it out?
It's called We're All Right, and I think it will come very early next year.
Very early next year?
Yeah.
Cool. We've been speaking for over an hour and a half. I suppose I should order some food for myself. It's been good to finally speak with you, man.
Yeah, man. Same here.
Sorry. Oh, what part of the city are you in, just out of curiosity?
Goregaon East.
Okay, that's like not it's like far but not super far from where I am. I'm in Andheri West in Lokhandwala.
I mean, I go to Lokhandwala a lot, bro.
Really? Who do you know over here?
Omar. He's one of the people that work on like the video. I've known him for years. He stays in Andheri Lokhandwala. I go Well, before I used to go chill at his place a lot. Now, obviously, that's much
pre-pandemic,
less. Yeah.
pre-pandems. I actually forgot to ask you about the visuals for this new record.
Yeah.
The new music. I don't kind of know what goes with what. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, what was great was these people that we met who did the visuals. At least Harmeet, the guy who did the artwork, he's been coming to our gig since he was 17.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know how old he is now, but he's been coming for at least 5 years. I thought it would be, and he just came up he came up to us after the Cognac Net gig, and he said, "I gotta do artwork for you guys." Just like, and at that time, I told him I'll sell him the EP in 2 weeks. A year later, I was like, "Hey man, check this out." And I really wanted to see what he felt like. I actually sent the EP as soon as it got done. I sent it, obviously, I put it on a drive and I sent it to the band members first. And then I sent it to just some like people that used to come to our gigs. Like a couple of people that used to come from the very early ages. I just wanted to see how big a shock I was putting on people.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised. A lot of them were just like, this sounds very similar to the old stuff. It's just dancey, like a dance floory version.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, wait, what was I talking about?
The visuals.
The visuals. So so I wanted to also, I thought it would be interesting if someone who did the visuals, the main person who did all the artwork, would know us from, know where we came from and how we got there. And since he's been coming to our gigs, he would get the energy and he'd get how we shifted. And firstly, he had to like it. Thankfully, he did. And then we spoke about like, and I like giving, so with the music, right? Because I write the songs, I feel really protective about it. But with all the artwork and stuff, I feel like I give them, whoever I work with, and this has been from the start, and they usually defer to me for the art stuff. Even in like the band, they just tell me to take care of it. So I'm like, I just like to like give them the broadest of rules and tell them to go with what they feel like, because I feel like I want to pick people I will like already like their art and I already like them as people, and they know their medium better than I know they know their medium better than I would ever know their medium. So I just kind of have to articulate sort of what I feel and then let them go with it. And that's what we did. Even with the video, the Deepthi and Saket who did the video, we were just like, we actually told them, pick the song that you feel like you want to do the video on. Pick the song, give us ideas. If there's something, if we already know that you're really good at your art, we already like your art, otherwise we wouldn't have approached you. So we really trust your sensibilities. So unless you come up unless it's ideologically opposed to something we would do, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I thought I was really, really happy with what they did. It felt like a complete package to me. Like I get really humbled when other people like give art and like stuff to like the music we make.
You got lucky there, and it's sort of a message to all aspiring kind of creatives out there. If there's somebody you want to work with, sometimes it's as easy as just going up and making yourself known and talking to them.
Yeah.
And it's just as important to remember that doesn't always work out. Often it doesn't work out. But
no,
if you can't you can't get lucky if you don't put yourself out there. And
exactly,
it must have been really cool for them to be able to make visuals for you guys if they've been following you since, if he's been following you since 7, you said?
17.
17. Oh yeah. Wow, I heard 7. 17 is still
yeah,
still ways back. It means a lot.
So if he was 7, we'd be really old.
I know. I was trying to, I mean, I don't know how old this person is, but I was trying to figure out the mathematics behind it, and I was just gonna accept the number 7 without questioning it. But you know, like you know, even John Frusciante, when he joined the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he was a fan of them.
Yeah.
You know, he had been a fan of them for many years, and then he finally got to be in the band, and now he's like he's considered the quintessential guitarist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, even though there's been a bunch.
You know what's funny though? He was a fan of the band, but when he came on, he pretty much changed the band.
He did, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. He's considered the part of the best lineup. Most people would consider him part of the best lineup of the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
He's got like a killer solo album as well. I don't remember the name.
He's got many solo albums. He's if you look up his solo catalog, it's quite extensive, and he's covered a lot of different types of stuff. There's the first solo album he put out when he was like like on heroin. That album is sort of famous as a cult type record because I think it's all done in 4-track recorder or something like that, and you can hear him, you know, actively working through something on those recordings. But he's pretty prolific. Like there was 1 year in the mid 2000s where I think he put out like 5 records.
Whoa!
And most recently he put out a drum and bass album called Maya, like very recently, like this year. And it's really interesting to hear interviews. He's got a few interviews online where he's talking about the new record and just his love of electronic music and drum and bass. And it's really interesting. What's really nice about these interviews is that he's so sincere. Like he's just like a sincere fan of this music. And he's also sincerely happy to have the opportunity to put out a drum and bass album. Like, that really comes across in these interviews. So they're worth checking out if you are interested in John Frusciante's side projects.
I shall check them out. I don't have much to do these days.
Well, there's we live in the era of content, so there's like so much stuff to check out. I very much like I don't have any Netflix accounts or anything. When it comes to pop culture, I definitely miss out on a lot. But I've just spent most of my time in the podcasting world and listening to esoteric music and listening to lectures and reading. So it sort of explains why I'm not so in tune to pop culture, certainly the way I used to be. You said you used to work at a record store. I used to work at a CD store when I was in my early 20s. At that time, I really knew, like, you know, I had a pretty good idea of what was out there for the time. When were you working at a record store, and where was the record store?
Mahim.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's called...
And it was a vinyl?
Vinyl, yeah. It's called the Revolver Club. It's pretty neat.
I think someone else has mentioned this to me before.
Shalom, I think, still works there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Shalom and I, we pretty much do a lot of things together.
You guys go way back, hey?
Yeah, first day of what we call junior college. I think in Canada or America, we call high school.
Okay.
So
yeah, I believe you're correct.
He was sitting somewhere else, and I was sitting alone because I guess nobody wanted to sit with me. And then, and then, like this, I guess the jock type dude came in, and he went straight to where Shalom was sitting. He's like, "Get out! I'm sitting here." And he came and he sat next to me. And then I was like, "What do you do, man?" He's like, "Nothing. I'm trying to learn how to play guitar." And I was like, "Don't do that. Learn how to play the bass."
That's good planning from early on. So, help me out. When was that in terms of time? Like, in terms of what year was that? If you're willing to say what year that was, and how does that relate to like what music you were listening to at that time?
That was 2018.
2018.
Yeah, I was listening to like no, wait. 2008.
Junior college.
2008.
2008. Yeah, I was like, wow, this is a whirlwind roller coaster over here.
2008, sorry. I was just into like the Arctic Monkeys type stuff.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You could probably, Fratellis, Arctic Monkeys, Oasis. I was really into Britpop. Anything British. I have these phases, like I used to try and walk like Liam Gallagher. It was embarrassing.
I've never heard anyone say that. That's interesting.
He has a walk, man. He has this,
he
like
does,
his hands go behind. I'm not doing it. This is audio only. It's cool.
Yeah. No one can see what you're doing. Cool, man. I think I probably should go fix myself something to eat or something. It's been great chatting with you. We should do it again,
Yes.
especially in real life when this pandemic ends. I look really forward to hearing the rest of these songs, and I look forward to seeing what the Lightyears Explode do in the future. As I have said many times, like really one of my favorite bands. I love what you guys do. I think it's awesome. So please keep it up.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been great.